Hi, welcome to Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. I'll be joined again today with Bob Greaves, my fantastic co-host, and today I thought we'd follow up on last week's show a little bit. Last week we had Troy Roberts on the show, who is a Canadian atheist and very active evangelist like myself, and we talked about the ethics of being a devangelist, but also touched a bit on the consequences of it and on the consequences of speaking your mind and being honest about what you believe. And I feel that deserves a little bit more digging. I saw Dr. Jones had posted today about changing his show as well, um, and focusing on some of the harsh language, the treatment that even people, believers within the New Covenant group, are getting from other religious people. And to start the show, before I bring Bob in, I just wanted to read you a little snippet of something that I'd written on my blog some time ago, going over why or the consequences of when I came out. And I use came out for a reason. Specifically, there have been studies as recent as 2010, I believe, from the University of Minnesota. There was a study that said that atheists are the most distrusted group in America, behind any religious group or even other social group. The atheists would be the least likely to be elected as president, least likely to be trusted around people's children. In general, there's just a bad rap. So coming out for an atheist is sometimes just as large of consequences as for people that come out of the closet as homosexuals or for any other reason. As a matter of fact, homosexuals are now better represented in Congress than atheists are. There's, I believe, 8 out of the closet homosexuals in Congress now. And there's only one atheist who just replaced the only other one. But I don't want to focus entirely on atheism. It's about being honest about what you believe and about having beliefs that are different from the mainstream. So this is just a little snippet that I wanted to say from when I did come out completely. I did it through a Facebook post to let everybody know. And since then, I've been unfriended on Facebook by several people. I've had them send me messages. I've had my account blocked. I've been told by people that were formerly close friends that they can't handle even knowing that I'm an atheist and seeing the things that they've done before. There are people who do still consider me a friend, but have blocked me because they cannot handle reading the things that I write. I can understand that. And I've been threatened by complete strangers. I made a choice not only to be honest about myself, but to be active about my beliefs and to start conversations. And with that, I put myself into a different category. But I hope that what I do and that what Bob does and the New Covenant group does, it can be inspiring to other people to not only face the consequences of coming out and speaking your mind and being truly honest about what you believe, but to asking questions and having conversations with other people as well. So, Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I can't picture myself unfriending you. I don't know. I don't find the atheism in any manner hostile. I don't find it challenging or now not to turn it into something that's like Melba toast, but as intense as some of our conversations have gotten, I find the quest for honest discussion to be so refreshing that it is. I don't know. I guess I suppose that whether one is a theist or an atheist, or however we might describe ourselves, that perhaps the level of insecurity we have in it, or the discomfort we have when trying to really be honest about why that might be so. Makes some people perhaps uncomfortable. I think other people have been, taught to believe it. By the way, one of the reasons why you can't get an atheist to be president is you'll never get the electoral votes from Texas, Pennsylvania, South Carolina,
Unless we let
Tennessee,
him secede.
Maryland. There's what, 7 states that don't allow you to run for public office if you're an atheist?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, but we could just let their petitions to secede go through, and then we're golden.
Oh, yeah, yeah, there you
We
go.
just got a viewer
But
comment that says, "I wish all members of Congress and the Senate were atheists." I can't say necessarily that I agree with that one. I'll say that I wish they were all secularist and they didn't bring their religion to the table. I don't think that atheism should be enforced upon anyone either. But man, would it be nice if people stopped bringing their religion into the laws.
well, I don't think we understand the level at which the religious story that we go by has affected our politics. Not that I want to get too deep into politics, but our dualities, our concept of who our allies are or are not, and even some of the issues that I remember when Clinton sent troops to. I can't remember, somewhere in the Baltic. It's been a while. And the people that was actually defending there were Muslims, and the people that they were being defended against were actually Christians. And there's some people who thought this was just horrific. But the government there was extremely abusive, and the way they were behaving. And so I think that the story that we spin affects our government in a way where politics have ceased to be, well, for reasons other than religion too. They've ceased to be about trying to find genuine solutions to public policies. It's more loyalty to a philosophy and being against another philosophy. And then I find myself very disillusioned with the whole kit and caboodle myself.
I have to agree. I mean, it's scary how much a person's worldview can color the information that they take in, even if it is. I mean, there's political worldviews and philosophical worldviews, religious worldviews, and I think that these are the main reasons that these issues can be so divisive. When you find out somebody sees something, if you look at the same exact object and you both see it from very different perspectives, it almost seems like the other person is betraying you in a way. I can understand where they're coming from there, but it's how can we get past this? What can we do to make it so that it's
I
not
think
so
in
damaging?
America we're not as multicultural in that the closest we get to being multicultural is we might know a gay person, an atheist, a black person, and somebody who speaks Spanish. And this is far from being truly multicultural. And so there's a sense, I think a lot of Americans naively, it's not necessarily their fault, but they naively think that if you are an intelligent person, there's only one real way to understand reality. And as a result, people who don't agree with them are obviously, inept, somehow dysfunctional, unintelligent, not really thinking. And if one were to go, say, live in the brush of Brazil for 2 years and have to deal with another culture, and you begin to discover in real time, in a way that would it would take them those several months to figure out how radically different they understand almost everything. And not that it's better or worse or whatever, but it's different. And so I think in America here, we're not accustomed to the idea that that life is an optical illusion, and there's more than one way to see it coherently. And we get the impression that because we have a coherent view of it, that we therefore must be right.
That's a very Eastern mystic kind of bumper sticker right there. Life is an optical illusion. I like it. It's true, but I so I know I asked you last week, but but I think it's worth recapping. When you left your ministry, when you had your deconversion from fundamentalism, what kind of consequences did that cause for you with your family, your general cohort, your associations?
Well, in some ways, not much. My family, there was at that point in time nobody in my family who was, to my knowledge, even professing to be a Christian that would have anything to do with fundamentalism. So its chances are there's even some relief there. There were some who would definitely profess to be Christian, but not fundamentalist. So there was no real consequence in terms of family. Uh, there were certain friends that I had that were certainly unsure of me, and some who just, as it were, almost refused to believe it, and so they would continue to relate to me as if I was still a fundamentalist, and think right over their head. But of course, it did mean that I was no longer available to be a minister. First of all, the churches that would have been a part of the tradition I was in wouldn't have me with my shift in faith, and others that weren't of that shift that I'd gone to wouldn't trust somebody who'd come up with with that sort of previous background without going through some sort of training, and or kind of getting a new rubber stamp of approval. And I suppose that so it meant that finding a different career, different career choice, which was to me very disappointing. But I don't think I ever felt or experienced any radical hatred or anything like that. But I also decided that I would seek to, communicate, to be understanding. And so I think I did find ways of diffusing a lot of that hostility. Now, about the same time, when I had decided to go back to school, and I went back to college and got a degree in computer programming. The very month that I graduated, my first marriage fell apart. And so being a divorced person was perhaps even more of a problem for a person who'd come from a fundamentalist background than even leaving the faith, perhaps. But other than that, I really didn't experience much of anything.
I wanted to pose the same question to viewers. If anybody has a a story or consequences that you've seen, we would love to get that message here. Share that, because it's something that I don't know if enough people realize how significant these prejudices against outgroup people can be, and how damaging it can be for other people. I've donated to causes in the past and assisted in ways where people have been kicked out of their homes, been essentially shunned. I actually, one of my most influential college professors was the son of a preacher in the South who, on two separate occasions, had the town physically move them out of town because of the things he was preaching about equality. And these can be horrifying experiences for anybody. So if there's any viewers that have a story or short consequences, we would love to see them. And if you have the opportunity, one thing I'd really like to do is put together a clip reel of people telling their stories. So if you have the ability to film what you're saying and post that on YouTube or send it in and send us the link, we would love to have something like that with New Covenant Group. That it'd be fantastic for us to be able to help share our stories, but don't just say the bad that's happened. This is the key. Let us know what's happened that's good as well. How your life has changed positively since that happened. We have a viewer comment here. It says, Do you think more atheists could get into Congress and Senate if they pretended to be gay? I like that. And actually, there's an observation on that one too that was made with this recent race. There were three out of the closet homosexuals involved in the race. One of them, right here in Wisconsin, was Tammy Baldwin. She is the first openly lesbian senator in the United States. And then we have I wrote their names down here. Kirsten Sinema is she's not only an atheist, but she's also bisexual. And then there is a Mark Tanako, who is openly homosexual. Um, so they won their races, but what was significant about that is that it wasn't brought up. I live in Wisconsin. I saw the political attack ads, and not once in any of the ads run by conservative, focus on the family type groups, was the fact that Tammy Baldwin is homosexual even brought up one time. It's almost become a non-issue, and I thought that was mind-blowing. However, when I went to Kirsten Sinema's campaign website, it did specifically address that she does not self-identify as an atheist or an agnostic. She prefers not to put any labels of that, and feels that it's not important to her ability to legislate or be part of it. So she still felt the need to defend herself for that, but not being bisexual anymore. So I thought that was interesting.
I can't. Yeah, perhaps the three-way race was just. It's gotten to a point where there's some things where even though people may have a certain attitude, they don't dare test the waters in some ways, and I guess that's part of the as society changes, as we go through various value changes and attitude changes. That's par for the course. It's going to take a while. It takes almost like it's the generation that comes up after we no longer even talked about it that becomes even unaware of the fact that you didn't have those problems. One of the odd things from my own upbringing, although my childhood was in many ways very unpleasant, one of the strange things that my parents had decided to do, and that I'm very grateful for, is my parents never talked about racism. They never talked about politics. I grew up, I had no idea what my parents thought about any political issues. They never talked about it. And I grew up never knowing until I was 13 years old that there were actually people from other races that didn't get along. I didn't know that. My father had the kind of a job where oftentimes people visiting the country from overseas involved with IBM would, not only visit, but come into our house, have dinner. And so, I met people from India, from Africa, from Germany, from Turkey, from, all over the world, South America, what have you, places that IBM was involved in. And these people would be guests in our home, and different races and nationalities. And, they were just intelligent people like us. And I had no idea that there were people who weren't getting along. And I remember as I got to middle school and starting to look at things that were more contemporary instead of ancient history, it was kind of a culture shock for me. We were so well isolated from that, and I was probably so busy playing the guitar that it just never had. It was totally new to me.
I wish I was that lucky. Unfortunately, and I can tell the story confidently, knowing that my dad doesn't watch my show. But he was not so egalitarian or reserved with his beliefs, and my dad. This is crazy in my opinion, but he self-identifies as a bigot, uh, and unabashedly so. And not he says he is not racist; he is culturally bigoted, which I think speaks very much back to your point that people growing up in a cultural vacuum really don't have the exposure. I mean, in his case, it's not something that he's doing unawares, so I'm not sure we can chalk it up to naivety. But either way, it's mind-boggling to me. And my one goal through all of my evangelical work and everything that I do is to get my dad to stop being homophobic. I don't care about his religious ideas or anything of that nature. Just if he can just accept that gay people are here, that would be
Mhm.
that would be okay with me.
You know, another odd thing about growing up is that I grew up in a town in, upstate New York that was all white. So we never had any racial problems here because we never had anyone else to deal with. And I remember when the first black family moved in, at least the first black family I was aware of, moved into the hamlet where we lived. And there was some what to do about it. But I remember thinking to myself, what? Explain this to me, And one of my older sisters actually dated their son, and I don't know. So that was sort of odd, but I suppose that both the fact that my parents never discussed that issue, never brought it up, never acted like it even existed, and the fact that we never had any examples in town to actually witness the problem. I guess I grew up thinking everybody lived in a ranch style home with 2 cars and a large garage and probably went up to the lake on the weekends. That was my protected childhood.
I think that plays a role. My grandfather was a doctor. My dad grew up in wealthy upper class white neighborhoods, and he grew up in the 60s and 70s, where many things still just weren't talked about in upper class society. So there's a certain amount of childhood that comes into it, but I don't know. The thing that gets to me is when I came out as an atheist, I was worried about the consequences that was going to have with my wife's family, with some of my closest friends. I am a godfather. I have a godson. His name is Thomas. He's fantastic. And this was at the time I participated in the ceremony to become a godfather through the church. Or my wife and I became his godparents in his baptism. Um, I I was still in and participating in the Catholic Church, but at that point, I would have self-identified as a deist. So even then, I was terrified to tell them, and the consequences that might have. I it was risking our friendship, and luckily for me, I didn't have any major consequences. I just was sort of holding an irrational fear from the horror stories that I've read, but that could have been so different. And the thing that I wonder is, and sometimes I regret that I ended up marrying a nice upper middle class white girl, and not a black guy from Chicago. That would have changed my dad's opinions a little bit quicker, I think.
It changed everything. Greg, did you
just
disappear?
oh, can you hear me?
For a moment there, I couldn't hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we just got a viewer sent something in. It's I'm not going to give her name right away. Is that well? I mean, the name is on there. So, Monica Livingston. So she's one of the New Covenant Group hosts. Saying I've got family right this minute in time who are deleting me right and left because of my beliefs, because my beliefs differ from them. It is so sad that we can't just live, love, and get along. So there it is, right from one of the hosts from the New Covenant Group, losing friends because of what we're doing here, losing family because of what we're doing here.
It just seems to me that who we are as human beings is far more important than, one of the things that you and I, is it might get lost in some of the conversations we have because we get along with each other well enough that you being an atheist and I being a theist, that there is something radically, fundamentally different in the foundation of the paradigm with which we view the world. But I think we can both recognize that we're also forming an opinion that we have struggled to form, that makes sense to us, and that we also acknowledge, look, it's not as if we either of us have any privileged information that seals this deal for us so that, I know what I'm talking about. And it just seems to me so insane that when you can have a human being in front of you and they are really there and they are really human and they have a life and they have needs, they have thoughts, they have connections, they have meaning, and this doesn't mean anything to you but something over which none of us can ever be a real expert, is the dividing line. That strikes me as just insane. It doesn't make any sense. Where is it like we're looking for excuses to kind of minimize the number of people we have to interact with? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
I have to share. My sister-in-law has been here visiting the last week. So my wife's sister, and she lives in the UK now. I was fortunate enough for her to fall in love when she was on vacation with a British fellow who is one of the most intelligent people I know. Very articulate, very likable in every way, and also an atheist. And that was well known very shortly after they started dating. So I didn't have to break down that barrier first, which was a big benefit for me. And my sister-in-law, I haven't really talked with her about where she stands entirely, but I know that she's not where she used to be. We could put it that way, at least. And this really, as much as my mother-in-law is okay with it and accepting it, it's a struggle for her because these are deeply held beliefs, and it's a concern for her. She actually worries about us. When my grandmother passed away a few months ago, she talked to my wife a bit about how I can cope with it and how I was handling it, and how does my lack of belief affect that. So I'm hoping that
I would think that if I were to guess, that if a person is really an atheist, that the death of someone means you're not going to see them again. That's sad. That's a loss, but it's not as if you would have to believe that they are biologically recomposing in some other form, or I mean, the elements that made up they're gone. They are no more. I don't what's there to cope with.
cope with the loss.
You're breaking up. I couldn't hear you. What was it you said?
Coping with the loss, I guess. I mean, it's I see one of the big benefits to having religious beliefs, a belief in the afterlife, is that you don't need to face the consequences of death. In that, I mean, there's Pascal's wager that if you believe in God and you're wrong, you're simply dead. But if you don't believe and you're wrong, then you could potentially face an eternity of damnation. And as much as I reject that way of reasoning, there's also the opposite. When you just look at death, if you believe in the afterlife and somebody you love and cares about dies, you have the benefit of believing that they've lived on, they can watch over you, they've done things in so many ways. And I'll tell you, there wouldn't be a lot of things more comforting to me than thinking I was going to be able to see my grandparents again someday, and being able to talk with them. It would be huge. I would love to know that not only did my grandmother live on after her death, but that she regained her mental capacities, and that the dementia that had torn at her for years was lifted away, and she became the grandmother that I knew as a child again. That would be comforting for me. That would be Excuse me. That would be
Yeah,
significant.
yeah, that might be a bonus someday. Uh, I I think that there are many people who have been radically abused by the notion that you know I've seen, what if you have a fundamentalist mom and dad who have a somewhat of a strong family, but these just deep beliefs, and then they have a child who comes out and says, "Look, this never made any sense to me. You're all idiots. I don't believe this. I never really did." And then there's this big fight and blow up, and the kid leaves the house in a fit of anger and rage, and gets killed in a car accident. Is
It's
this
like a
family going to
Lifetime movie.
believe that their child's in hell? Um, there's some families that have gone through that kind of thing, and they do believe that. And uh, I don't know what that does to you, but it's going to do one of two things. You're going to be very angry at God, or you're going to find a way of dealing with it by learning to, and this seems to me so unloving, by learning to justify the God who's going to put your own child in hell because they weren't a believer. That strikes me as a real violation of talk about people not having natural affection. Um, that strikes me as strange, and I've seen this happen in families. Like we were talking about this even earlier, that when people come out as non-believers, that some families can deal with this quite badly. Becomes
We have
very
another
abusive.
viewer comment here. It says, I had an atheist friend when I was in high school. I was determined to convince him that there was a God and he needed to accept him so he wouldn't go to hell. I look back on those days and it hurts so much to realize how much irrational psychological abuse that he was put through, not just by me, but by the majority of the students who knew him. I was thankful to have a chance to apologize to him recently for my ridiculous behavior. He's currently a scientist who is researching string theory and still an atheist. I'm very proud of the man he has become. Bravo,
Excellent.
viewer.
Excellent.
Well done for apologizing in the future. But it's true, and that's something that I wanted to bring up when I was talking about the comfort that you can get from some religion. Is a lot of times in conversations of this nature, things get brought up that are hurtful in an unintentional way, and people need to be sensitive to that as well. I know I've done it in the past, and this is part of what the ethics of evangelism comes to. Is it can be very hurtful to suggest to somebody that their their spouse, their child, their parent, their best friend didn't live on after they died. Um, and it can be just as hurtful to sort of throw the opposite in somebody's face, which I've had happen to me. As an atheist, you're telling me that everybody in your family is just gone forever. They're dead. They're never coming back. They're erased. Their life was meaningless. It's the end. And I think we need to be sensitive to how we talk about things of that nature as well.
Something that we've observed in psychology is that when people are faced with a difficult decision, one that lacks clarity, that when they finally come to the point where they have to make a decision, they will begin to give to their decision more clarity than it really had. They'll spin themselves a story to turn their decision into something that they could more clearly choose. And I really think that there are many people who, without regard to whether they were believing or non-believing, they have made a great number of decisions in their life. They have paid the price for some of those decisions, and they've spun a story that helps justify the decisions they've made in light of what it is they think. Then along comes somebody who claims that something else is really so. And immediately, many people will realize this challenges the very meaning of some of the very difficult suffering they've already gone through because of decisions they've had to deal with. So there's a sense in which, because of the investment of our lives, the decisions we've had to make, that this can be very, it rips the rug out from under you. And so there's a sense in which we have to be sensitive to how people are going to be dealing with that. It's very unsettling.
I, have you experienced anything with um, accidental consequences of asking questions, unintended things of that nature, having people get upset with you not because of who you are and what you do, but because of a question that you've asked or something of that nature?
Well, nothing that was too traumatic or dramatic, but there was a time when, as I'm becoming more and more unconventional, I would still be asked to preach and speak in places because I was still considered, recognized as a person who was a believer, just not conventional. Where I would ask questions and suggest things that should be thought about, and uh, it would it would bother a lot of people. I would suggest such things as, God doesn't have a will for your life. This isn't something that the Bible actually talks about. And an illustration or an example that I would often give is that, you're praying to God to help you find your brown shoes up at the mall. Meanwhile, there's somebody else who's experiencing a horrible, violent rape behind the mall, praying to God. And you're trying to tell me that God is involved in your life, helping you find shoes, and ignoring this other person. What does this say? And I would sometimes recommend to people that they think about it. And I would find that, some people would dislike the fact, oh, I heard Bob Graves is going to be speaking tonight or something, and they didn't want to hear a lot of those questions that might be thrown at them. I was fortunate enough, by the way. One of the things that helped me, I think, in my transition is that when I left ministry, I left a church, and I immediately attached myself to a different church that had an unusual. I've never met anyone seen any of the church like it. Uh, it was certainly a believing, a church of believers, but it was a church that had a very sparse statement of faith. And it even said that the interpretation of the Bible is the right and responsibility of the individual. And so there was a great deal of freedom in this church for people to think very differently from each other. And they didn't always appreciate some of the ways I would think, but I had the freedom there to explore. And so I think that was very helpful, that I was able to find at least that kind of a transitional place to be in.
We've talked a little bit in the past about the harm that can come from some of the doctrines in the Bible, specifically being applied, things like hell doctrine, even though, from what I understand, you and Dr. Jones, as the linguists in you, which I'm not, so I can't make or form an opinion on this other than trust in your expertise, that the hell doctrine was a fabrication of the early church. But there's other ones in there too. That's where a lot of the various in-group, out-group, and judgments come from, that can easily be countered by many of the other parts of the Bible that talk about loving your neighbor and turning the other cheek and things of that nature. But it seems to me that we also need to recognize that it's not just asking the questions about what truly is written in the Bible and what the words really are there, but making sure that people. That's one of the biggest things that I've hurt people with, and the questions that I've asked is just making sure that people are aware of what actually is and what isn't in the Bible. Did you know that there is not a single admonishment of pedophilia in the Bible anywhere, saying
Right.
people shouldn't have sex with children?
Nor
I mean, if we
nothing
talk
about
about
lesbians
what
either.
a good book, a book of morality, that seems right up top of my list. Don't hurt kids, and that comment there has been one of the things that I've said that's been hurtful to people. But man,
Well, even issues about slavery, the
how to properly beat your slave is in there.
yeah, and a strange, a strange ethic in some ways is there. That's part of why you know I would even argue that. In fact, I did on one of my recent unconventional pastor shows. I argued that the traditional view of the nature of the Bible is itself unbiblical. That the Bible doesn't even claim to be what it is that fundamentalists or evangelicals claim it to be. That this is also a linguistic ruse that has been put upon the church, so that it's been for take too extreme a view of even the nature of the text, and which is strange because I like the way Dr. Jones has put it, that it's flat Earth technology. It really takes us way back to a place where we have to stand still in fixed beliefs that are not just fixed but archaic, just out of time and out of step with what we understand and know and need today.
Well, I'd wonder how anybody who was writing any one of the individual books in the Bible could potentially have said this Bible is going to be in authority well before they even knew which of the books were going to make the cut to the canon. But that might be a question for another day.
That gets begged.
So I don't know. I don't know where to go from here. This has been on my mind all week, and for quite actually since we had Augustine on the show. It was or Augustine. I'm sorry, I'm saying his name wrong now because Gus. Since we had Gus on the show, and he talked about the harm that comes to Jehovah's Witnesses for leaving. It's been really gnawing at me and really bothering me, and I want to know what we can do.
I suppose we can model coming to the discussion, talking these things over. You and I have been now talking since August 12th on a regular basis. Neither one of us has gotten hurt. Neither one of us are experiencing the retribution of the other. We've become friends. We haven't changed each other's mind about the fundamental basics, but we have perhaps no doubt experienced a great deal of broadening of our sense of acceptance and our sense of the safety of a good discussion and the value that is found in honesty, even if it doesn't end with everybody going, hey, we finally all agree. And I think that by modeling this, we show that unity in respect, unity in our humanity, is something that is fundamentally very valuable, and something where it's safe. We don't have to worry about some of these ramifications. I think that some people respond cruelly to those who believe differently, not just because they feel justified in being harsh, but because they fear what are the consequences going to be, either from human beings or from God or something like that. That they really fear what it is they think this is a slippery slope, and at the bottom is something you're not going to like, and they don't realize the way that they might then go to violate others by trying to avoid that slippery slope. And I think that by modeling it, doing exactly what we're doing, inviting others into the conversation, learning to appreciate that aspect of the conversation, and even experiencing modifications of how we think and how we put it together, even if we don't change some of the fundamental aspects, it helps make us all grow a bit more. And so these are things that I think we can do. But in a sense, when we ask what we can do, sometimes I think the best thing you can do is absolutely nothing. And I say that because although people say, look, all you need for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. No, that's not always true. You know what? I don't want to let anybody off the hook. Everybody's responsible for the way they behave. We don't, it's helpful to model better behavior, but you know what? People need to accept responsibility for the way they treat each other. They need to accept responsibility for the differences they make and the significance that they assign to those differences. And I think there's a sense in which, I don't think we need to handhold everybody. There may be some who might need it, and others who, maybe what they need is you a stern look, letting them know how disappointed we are in that ethic, or something that communicates that we're putting the baton and the ball in their hand, and it's up to them now to do something right with it.
I have to tell you that I've had questions asked of me or about me, things like, I understand that he's an atheist, but does he have to be so open about it? And it's funny, and that's one of those questions that I've had enough experience that the things like that don't faze me anymore. I understand where they're coming from, and I understand the meaning and the intention behind what they're saying, and not taking the words at face value. But I think that one thing that we could all benefit from a little bit is to think of something. Everybody champions some sort of human right, a group of some people. There's always something that somebody believes is being subjugated in a way, and if you take that, whatever group that you think is the one that is really getting oppressed, and you replace the word in it. So for my example, I know that the person in question who made this comment is a big champion of gay rights. So the only thing I can think is, if she were to have taken the word atheist out of that sentence and replaced it with gay, would she have ever said that? Is that something that she could look back at and go like, wow, I guess that was kind of an embarrassing question. I think that we could all benefit. I've learned from doing that in the past as well, that I've certainly put my foot in my mouth on more than one occasion. And in retrospect, doing that would have helped.
We're all growing. We're all growing up, and we're all trying. It's healthy for us to try to find a way of recognizing some of our own faux pas. But one of the things that I don't want us to have to do is to find a way of making up for our faux pas by not being ourselves. So, do you have to be a certain way? You know what? If you weren't going to be the way that you were, you're going to be some other way that's also going to be as honest, So, maybe there are at times better ways that we could say things or ask things, but the moment we're asking people to play turtle and hide in their shell, I don't know. That's not working for me.
No, I agree. I think that the benefit of thinking about things in that context is not silencing the question, but in possibly gleaning your own answer.
Right.
I think that had she thought of it in those terms beforehand, she'd have gone, never mind. It's not a question worth asking. Not a question that I shouldn't ask, but so much one that she knew, or she already did know the answer to. And
I find that from time to time, it's a bit inconvenient that there are other people.
That's a good point. Wouldn't the world be better if everybody was just the same, or better, or not better? Wouldn't the world be an easier place if everybody was exactly the same? It'd be. I don't know. I annoy the crap out of myself. I'm an arrogant jerk sometimes, and getting a bunch of me in the room, that'd be ugly. Well, Bob, we've got about a minute left. I wanted to give you the opportunity to give a little sign off. Anything you wanted to say to end cap the show here?
Well, hey, let me invite other people to suggest ideas for what they think. You and I, we've gone through such a process of getting to know each other. We like each other so much that the oh, I don't know, hey, what do you think? The attitude isn't going to be there. So maybe some people could suggest some issues that they think you and I would struggle with. Because I don't see you and I really thinking in terms of let's struggle, or I got to make a point, or I don't like what we're not doing that. So perhaps our viewers could come up with some ideas they think would be stimulating and meaningful, useful discussions for a theist and atheist to have in terms of just discussing some of those ideas. So
That's a
I'd invite
fantastic idea.
viewers to suggest it.
Please do. We would love that. Controversial questions would be fantastic. I would love to actually find something that Bob and I disagree on again for a while. I have to say that Troy, after the show last week, he sent me a message on Facebook, and I'm going to read it real quick as my last sign off here. He says, it's a lot more fun dealing with fundamentalists than it is with Bob. I have to say, he is entirely too reasonable.
Well, that's very nice of him.
So, with that, this has been Inspiring Honesty. Join us again next week at 6 o'clock. Thank you for joining us, and please send us questions. We would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and find something that we can really sink our teeth into. Have a great week.
"7 p.m. with the Unconventional Pastor." You haven't had enough of Bob Greaves, you say? Well, don't worry, because he'll be right back with the Unconventional Pastor coming up at 7 p.m. Stay tuned.